On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to briefly get into Dominick Puni. Sounds like he's going to be opting out of the bowl game and getting into where KU ranks in their Pro Football Focus grades at the end of the year, position by position.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere that you get your podcasts. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're talking some the latest news for KU football before their bowl game with Dominick Puni. And then we're going to get to our position-by-position breakdown of KU's Pro Football Focus ranks compared to the Big 12 to maybe give you inventory on where things stood at the end of the year, right? It's one thing to see it with the eye test, another to see it with the stats, another to see it with, another site like this to maybe give you a general idea of where things were in some positions that are maybe harder to track without the stats and what that all means for 2024. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're going to start with the news about Dominick Puni. So Bryson Stricker tweeted out that Puni is going to be opting out of the bowl game and that Calvin Clements is going to be starting. I had heard some similar stuff from behind closed doors, so this just kind of backs up some stuff that I was hearing as well. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. It obviously sucks for KU in the game because Dominick Puni is your best offensive lineman. He was an All Big 12 offensive lineman last year. He played guard for you, and he was All Big 12 honorable mention. I thought he should have been on one of the first two teams, and he was severely underrated. This year, he got properly rated. First team All Big 12, moves to left tackle, has an unbelievable season. The question was, we knew he was a really good guard. Could he be a really good tackle? He got even better moving to left tackle, and obviously that sucks that KU's not going to have him. Having one of your best players for a game like this is pretty imperative. But good for him. What a career, man. Coming over from D2, from Central Missouri, making the jump up to Power 5, immediately becoming a starter. When he transferred in, it was kind of a under-the-radar transfer. Obviously, the D2, everything that came with that. And I remember at the time thinking, the team 2 years ago, the 2022 team, it didn't have a ton of depth. It had a good starting base coming into the season. You knew that the starters were going to be good players. And you had a couple guys, you added Kobe Baines late and stuff. But this year's team, you got Spencer Lavelle, you got Logan Brown till he got injured. You have Calvin Clements. You have, one of the guards between Baines, Reed Adams, and Ford coming off the bench. There is a lot of depth on this year's offensive line. Last year, you still had the starters that were, to that top notch of what they've been this year, but you didn't have as much depth. And so that was kind of my thought, okay, this will be great. Puni will come in, he'll provide you some depth. Turns out he was your best offensive lineman. And now, there's some talk that he could even be a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. I think at the very least, he feels like somebody who I feel very confident will get drafted in general. And what a come up for a guy like that. He'll be able to go somewhere, and who knows if he plays tackle at the NFL level. That'll kind of depend on the measurements and where everything is. But you've seen that now he can come into a team, and even if it's him playing guard and then being a swing tackle as a backup in the NFL, where you have limited rosters, having guys who can play all over the offensive line is so pivotal. And Dominick Puni is awesome. So what this means for the bowl game, Calvin Clements will be the starter. And I think that actually becomes very interesting here. Obviously, you'd like to have your good players for the bowl, but part of the bowl game is that, at the end of the day, this is kind of an exhibition game. And these bowl games have mattered less and less with players opting out and some of this stuff. And I wish they didn't, but, I understand it. And I'm not going to I understand you're going off to the NFL. Don't get hurt. There have been so many players that have dealt with that. It is a cool opportunity to get some of the young players in a game that is more of the exhibition, right? And who knows if Calvin Clements is seen as the starting left tackle for 2024 because Logan Brown, like I said, was injured. Maybe if Logan Brown never got injured in the midseason, maybe something clicks over the course of the year and he would be seen as the starting left tackle for 2024. So it's entirely possible. And we'll see how much this game goes into determining that. But what if Calvin Clements goes out there, who's a true freshman, and a giant bodied dude. What if he goes out there and has a really good performance? Then all of a sudden you're going to feel like, and by the way, this does not burn Calvin Clements redshirt. Then you're going to feel like next year you have a redshirt freshman left tackle who is good, and you at least have multiple years left to play, and he's a local kid, so you feel good about the we don't have to worry about like, some SEC school coming in to like poach him away, right? That could be a big deal. And even if he does have some ups and downs and struggles, this is a great learning experience as a true freshman getting to start in a bowl game. So I'm actually really excited for getting to watch Calvin Clements and the progression that this can help him with into the offseason. Now let's get into our Pro Football Focus stuff. We're going to start with the offense, then get to the defensive side of the ball and what this all means for 2024. Starting with the offense, here's your ratings on Pro Football Focus. Jason Bean is 6th. If eligible, Jalen Daniels would have been 4th. To be honest, I don't really think Pro Football Focus does a great job in evaluating quarterbacks for what it's worth. So I trust more numbers like total QBR and some of these other things. I trust it more, though, with grains of salt on line play, on the defense, and it helps give you more context to those. I think we have so many metrics and so many ways of evaluating quarterbacks that the PFF one, like, I don't know. The whole idea of the PFF one is to know that, they're throwing to the right people and stuff like that. But it's like, how do you know what the play is? So for what it's worth, the QBs ahead of Jalen Daniels would have been Dylan Gabriel, who's now going to Oregon, Garrett Green, who has another year at West Virginia, and John Reese Plumlee, who graduates. So, theoretically, things are opening up even more there. The running back position, Devin Neal ranked 7th, Daniel Highshaw 11th. This is another position I don't know that Pro Football Focus I care that much about the running back evaluation, because if you'll notice, like I remember a couple of years ago, David Montgomery for Iowa State broke the PFF record for most broken tackles or something in a career or in a season or something like that. They value broken tackles so much more than evaded tackles. And I understand why, because from the eye test, it's like, oh, look, both players could gain 10 yards. Somebody could just make a good cut and read the block properly that they didn't have to get hit. Somebody could have read the block wrong, or maybe they're not fast enough to get past the block and they have to break a tackle, and they do. The eye test says, oh, this guy broke a tackle, that guy didn't. But there is value in the running back vision. There is value in, having enough speed to hit the hole, knowing when to hit the hole, hitting it right, and all those things. And those are things that I think Devin Neal excels at, where it doesn't always come out. And also, I don't know that they're giving bonus points, which is something that I think both Neal and Highshaw do well. They always fall forward as running backs. That's not always the case for a lot of guys. So again, this is one with 7th and 11th. I'm not really putting much stock into. Receiver position for Pro Football Focus, Big 12 grades for KU. Lawrence Arnold comes in at 5th, Luke Grimm at 10th, Quentin Skinner at 11th. And I think what's interesting there is that kind of backs up the idea that, KU has 3 really good receivers, maybe not the superstar, though. I think Lawrence Arnold was outside the top 10, the halfway point through the season when we did this, and he finished 5th. So maybe that's basically saying over the back half of the season, Lawrence Arnold is emerging into being a superstar wide receiver. But I think what's interesting here is the depth and the prowess KU has at these 3 starting receiver positions. The only other team with 2 receivers in the top 10 are Oklahoma and Iowa State. Kansas has 2 with Lawrence Arnold and Luke Grimm. KU, in fact, they have 3 in the top 11. Kansas is the only team on the Pro Football Focus Big 12 grades with 3 receivers ranked in the top 25 by qualified players. So that shows you that, yeah, they are a really deep team. They have a lot of great options they can go to on the outside. At tight end, Mason Fairchild ranked 5th. Jared Casey ranked 14th. There were 29 eligible by snaps. But for what it's worth, Casey got dinged a little in the receiving grade, which I don't totally know why, but he was number 1 among the qualified tight ends was Jared Casey in pass blocking. He was also number 5 among qualified tight ends in run blocking, which I think that does kind of back up what we know he is this utility player who can do a little bit of everything. From the group, Ben Sinnett's gone. Benjamin Bramer is only a freshman at Iowa State. JT Sanders, I'd assume, is gone. I don't know if he graduates, but at the very least, probably the draft. And then Mason Tharp can have another year at Texas Tech. So some good tight end competition for what KU has, but you expect that to continue coming in next year. Offensive tackle, Dominick Puni ranked 2nd, circling back to that. So you're going to be without the second best offensive tackle by PFF grade in the Big 12. Bryce Cabledew ranked 15th of 33 offensive tackles. So if you're saying your first best is top 5 and your second best is 15th, if you view it as every team. There's 14 teams in the Big 12. Ideally, in a perfect world, everybody's top tackle would be 1 through 14. Everybody's second tackle would be 15 through 28. That would theoretically mean that you have the best second tackle in the Big 12. But now there's going to be questions. Can Cable Lou jump up to where Puni was last year? Offensive guard, Michael Ford ranked third. I think that was super underrated this year. I think, last year Puni was KU's most underrated, maybe player, certainly offensive lineman. I think that was Michael Ford this year. Most underrated player KU had was Michael Ford, third on a PFF ranking for guards. I think he's going to slide over to center next year. Kobe Baines at 17th, Armaj Reed Adams at 18th. That's a really good group. 3 guards in the top half of the 35 qualified. So I really like that overall. And then center, Mike Nowitzki only ranked 11th among qualified Big 12 centers. I think this had to do with injuries, and that reflected more on what ended up being, I think, by some of the grades, a down year for Mike Nowitzki. But I think it was just injury related. He was playing through a lot of stuff. I bet that Mike Nowitzki has one of his best games of the year in the bowl game because they had all the time off in between. Let's get to our defensive Pro Football Focus grades, what it means and what it means for 2024 here with Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of LOJ is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right candidates, right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get to the defensive Pro Football Focus grades, and we'll get to what it means for 2024. Don't forget, you can check out stuff with Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcast. We did signing day stuff. Deshaun Warner, the highest graded recruit KU's ever gotten. Best class KU's had since 2010. And we also will get to a KU Yale preview. Defensive side of the ball, let's start with the defensive tackle, interior defensive line. So a lot of the numbers were pretty friendly on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive tackle, Tommy Dunn only comes in at 32nd. Among 48 qualified, and he was your top D tackle this year by PFF grade. Devin Phillips came in number 2 at 34th. Gage Keys came in number 3 at 40th, and DJ Withers came in at 48th. And Dunn and Phillips do represent a slight upgrade from what you had last year there. So this position, I think, was better. And also, I will say, based on how KU plays, I don't think this unit gets as many stats and things, but they still do make an impact. So I do think some of the grades are undersold a bit on this position and underrated to not quite as good as they are because of how KU schemes this position. But even if you do factor that in and be like, well, they're just asking them to take on blocks and do this and that. Even if you bump everyone up like 5 spots, say, for instance, on account for that and give them a little bit of a curve, right, then you'd still be coming up with 27th, 29th, 35th, 43rd among 48, right? So it still has been a position that needs to get better. And as far as the Gage Keys decision, he's obviously transferring to Auburn. On one hand, you just have to replace the 40th best defensive tackle in the Big 12. That sounds very doable. On the other hand, this was already kind of a weaker position for you compared to your other positions, especially versus the conference. And on top of that, you have one more to replace. And on top of that, does Gage Keys leaving and getting a big bag from Auburn, does it make any other, defensive lineman being like, wait, I'm better than him, I should be getting, X amount of dollars, right? So I do think that the Tommy Dunn and DJ Withers ceilings give you hope, right? Just redshirt sophomores playing their first hardcore football this year of D1 level after being more, slightly rotational guys in their early years. But the way KU's defense takes another step forward next year is kind of the spine of the defense, the middle of the defense. I feel good about the safeties, but, the linebackers have to take another step up. Defensive tackles have to take another step up, whether that's internal growth, whether that's bringing players in, whether it's a combination of both. That has to happen for KU next season, and I think that's reflective in some of the PFF grades. Defensive end, Austin Booker, number 1 in the Big 12 in PFF grades for defensive end. So Booker had an unbelievable season, and that was reflected there. Hayden Hatcher came in at 19th, which It's a really good season for, a guy who made a bunch of steps up this year and becomes a rotational defensive end who starts a couple games. Jeremy Robinson ranked 28th. His grade got lowered a bit against the run, but there were 49 qualified. So if you're saying you have 3 of the top 28 in the Big 12, a lot of other teams don't have that. And when you're looking at next year, if Austin Booker does go, if he goes pro or transfers to another school, this position becomes a real question mark, I think, because then it's like, okay, Hatcher graduates, Jeremy Robinson's back, and then you're looking at, okay, you got a Dylan Woodkey. Like, what does all this mean? If he does come back, it becomes a strength in the Big 12. The biggest decision is Austin Booker, in my opinion, of this offseason relies with him, because if Devin Neal comes back, it's a huge get for KU. But if he doesn't, they still have Daniel Highshaw, right? If Kobe Bryant comes back, it's a huge boon for KU. But if he doesn't come back, they still have Mello Dotson and a lot of these other talented corners. If Austin Booker goes pro, yes, KU's done a good job. They've shown they've gone from Kyron Johnson, Lonnie Phelps to Austin Booker. So maybe they can find that next guy. But that's with Hayden Hatcher gone and Patrick Joyner gone, right? You have Woodkey and maybe Robinson takes another step up if he comes back. This, to me, Austin Booker is the biggest decision KU has in the offseason. And we'll see where it goes. Linebacker position. J.B. Brown, 8th in the Big 12. So that certainly backs up what I saw, that he was, KU's most explosive and athletic linebacker. Rich Miller came in 25th. There were 41 qualified here, so kind of in the middle of the pack. And then Tywan Berryhill ranked last. He was 41st of the 41 linebackers qualified in the Big 12. So again, this is a position that I think needs to get better, but I think it has the base to do so. If J.B. Brown, you're starting with him 8th in his first year Big 12, maybe he can be top 5 next year with another year of seasoning. Maybe Logan Brantley starts playing more. Maybe you bring in a transfer addition here. Maybe Tywan Berryhill can improve his game. I think he was playing through some injuries too. For what it's worth, Craig Young, I didn't mention here, he's listed as a safety. If he was a linebacker, he'd be rated the 16th best linebacker, so behind Brown, ahead of Miller on just KU alone. But yeah, so overall excited what Brown can do with another offseason. But it's clear this and D tackle are KU's biggest areas that they have room to improve, and I think can. Corner, Mello Dotson was 2nd, Kobe Bryant was 5th. As of like a week or two ago, they were 1 and 2, and then like no games happened, and they fell to 2 and 5. So I don't know what PFF did messing with some of the ratings over the last week or two. Maybe they changed some of the formula or something. Nonetheless, as far as the other top 5 in the Big 12 with Mello 2 and Kobe 5, one is at Texas. They're going to the SEC. Miles Purchase is at Iowa State. He has one more year if he wants it. And then Josh Newton, I think, is off to the NFL after this for TCU. So you might have, if Kobe comes back, you might bring back the only top 5 corners if Purchase were to go pro 2 for Iowa State. Maybe not. The other one here is Kalen Gervin. He was 22nd, which that's big shoes to fill if you think about it for the third corner. If you're saying your third corner is still a top half corner in the Big 12, whereas other schools are like, man, we just hope we have one top half corner in the Big 12. That's big shoes to fill for whoever does have to fill it for KU, whether it's Demarius McGee, whether it's BJ Dilworth or Jameel Croft or Jacoby Davis or one of the 3 freshmen they have coming in, right? That's big shoes to fill of what Kalen Gervin provided you as a third corner, but I think they do have talent to do it. The safety position, Marvin Grant is 7th, so he had a great year. Kenny Logan, 10th. Craig Young, 28th. OJ Burrows, 31st. Now, I will say that rating probably looks worse than it is. He had kind of a bad start. He finished really strong. It's a 50 safeties because you have the strong safeties, free safeties, players who are like Craig Young get classified as safeties. So I think this shows that the safety unit was a pretty big strength for KU. You had a lot of guys who could do it. And I'm really excited to see what another year can do for Marvin Grant. He was more of just a box safety in 2022. Then he went in the offseason. They said he took it very seriously, started looking at a lot more tape, just took it to the next level. And he had an excellent year, and I think that was reflective. Honestly, he was probably the most underrated player. I talked about that with Michael Ford. Marvin Grant was probably the most underrated player on the KU defense this year. And he ended up being your highest graded safety on PFF that, maybe he can be a top 5 safety in the Big 12, maybe even higher than that next season. Maybe he's a, all Big 12 type of candidate at the safety position. You bring Burrows back too. So I'm really excited what Grant can do in another year. All right, what does this all mean for 2024? Let's get to that coming up in a moment here with Locked on Jayhawks. We are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 back if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can bet on Kansas in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl against UNLV. They're minus 12.5 right now on FanDuel, so you think you're going to win more by that. The over-under 64.5. They're expecting a lot of points. That should make it fun. You can get in on that too. And once we get closer to the game, I'd imagine there'll be some player props up. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. What does all this mean with the PFF numbers for KU in 2024? I think offensively, Kansas should really be able to roll in the Big 12, but they do have that glaring hole to fill at left tackle that they'll have to figure out. That's part of the beauty, though, of Dominick Puni opting out for the bowl game, is that maybe you get that answer with Calvin Clements, right? Instead of going into next offseason with a complete unknown, thinking that, yeah, this guy's got good potential, but will he be ready as a redshirt freshman? Like, maybe we're going to know right away in about a week's time. So that's pretty exciting. But overall, the offense, you look pretty locked and loaded. Even some of your departures, you have key players. And obviously the big question will be, can you keep Jalen Daniels healthy? That's been the question the past couple of years. And, if not, do you go with Cole Ballard? Do you go with Isaiah Marshall? All those sorts of things. But the infrastructure is there. There are a lot of good players all the way through for that KU offense. And certainly if you do have to go with the young quarterback, having those stud receivers that we talked about helps. On the defensive side of the ball, it's kind of shaky right now in terms of knowing what it's going to look like next year, just because I think there are more decisions to be had and more portal decisions and NFL decisions that you can kind of convince yourself that this defense could be the same. It could be way better. Or if some decisions go against you, it could be worse, right? If Austin Booker is no longer on KU next season, it certainly becomes hard to be better than last year. But then again, we were saying that a season ago when you lost Lonnie Phelps and they ended up taking a step forward. So you just have to find your way around the margins in other areas. I think as you look at it, though, like the safety position, like could be just as good as last year with Marvin Grant leading the way. And you add Devin Dye to the portal. Cornerback, if Kobe Bryant's back, it could be just as good, if not better, than it was a season ago. Linebacker and defensive tackle need to get better, especially if you lose Austin Booker. But if you do bring all these guys back, I think there's no reason KU couldn't be a top 5 defense in the Big 12 next year. That's a lot of decisions that have to happen, but I think they all are doable at the very least. So pretty exciting stuff. And if KU can have a top 5 defense next year, based on some of these decisions, right? You need Booker back, you need Kobe back, and you pair it with a healthy Jalen Daniels in the offense, sky is the limit for KU in 2024, especially with Texas and OU leaving the Big 12 for the SEC, even with Arizona and Utah, who should come in ready to roll right away. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back tomorrow for a KU Yale preview for KU Hoops. This has been LOJ.